Wednesday.
Hello. What a week it's been.
It's
This
Wednesday.
this week has been a very long year.
It has. Um, I feel like I girl bossed too hard, and now I am in charge of so many things, or like at least a part of so many things. And I would like to go back to like tooling around. I'm so good at tooling around.
I think this is our first like real episode in the like middle of the semester. The rest of them have not. I feel like it hit. The semester hit. Like we're in week 6. We're like over a third of the way done.
It is real. It got real this
It
week.
got real.
Holy cow. Wait, before we talk about anything like important, how was your 5K this weekend?
It was good. I we had 2 students that won $500 scholarships, so that
Awesome.
was really nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I did get started with them. They decided to walk, but they were walking so slow. I was like, I can't do this for 3 miles. Like, I'll see you at the end of it. Like, I like left them. They all walked
That's
together. They had fun, but
embarrassing.
I was just like, I cannot walk this slow. Like, this is not even my normal walking speed. Like,
Wow.
yeah. One of them was gonna run, but then when he found out the other two were like gonna walk, he's like, I'll just walk. And I'm like,
So,
okay.
did you run
I didn't run. I walked, but I walked fast. I
fast?
got the whole 3.2 miles done in 50 minutes,
Oh, that is fast.
which is like a 15-minute mile, but like I was walking, which
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't think that's real.
Yeah, I that is a fast mile.
It's
That
very fast.
it is. It
For
is.
walking. There are some people who
Yes.
jog slower than that. So
Jogging is stupid. So my I told my man friend that I wanted to start to like do more resistance training, and he came over about 12 minutes later, which I think he was preparing for this because we'd been talking about it with like dumbbells and a weighted vest. Pardon my French. So I was like, but these people always look like such jerks in their weighted vest on their morning walks. And he was like, just try it. So I tried it this morning, but I was so embarrassed that I like zipped it up under my like sweatshirt so no one knew I was wearing a weighted vest because that's embarrassing, right? I think weighted vests
yeah.
look like bulletproof vests, like you are defending yourself from something. Being fat, I guess. I don't know.
Oh.
It's fine. It's fine. It was funny.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyway, I have a weighted
I
vest, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a throwback to when you were talking about
When
your
Chloe needed a
clothing.
weighted
Yeah.
vest, according to her school, because she had
Now it's you.
ADHD,
Now you need to slow down.
we've come full circle.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. I'm tired. I actually did make myself a chai for tonight because I'm tired and I want to be ready for this.
Well, for coming to our episode, everybody. That we're done.
We need naps. Welcome to Coffee Break Classroom, brewed for higher ed, where teaching meets good vibes. We're just two friends chopping it up. Here you can expect a blend of ridiculous classroom stories, a little educational research, and some practical teaching techniques. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's talk teaching without the grading. So today we're going to talk about something cool. Oh, well, do we have to welcome them to Coffee Break Classroom like they know what they're listening to, right?
Yeah, it's brewed for higher ed.
It sure is. Folks, today we're going to be talking about how we build on prior learning. And I listened to a very brief educational podcast this morning in which they called building on prior learning the single most important thing an instructor can do. What do you think about that statement?
I don't know. I feel like there's so many facets of our job. I don't know if I can say one's more than important than the other one, but I do think connecting to experience is something that's important that we've talked on like a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done any preparation. I just opened up the slides from the one time you and I gave a talk. Like, that's all I've done.
Well, I put together my note page after taking a walk in a weighted vest this morning. So that makes me so much better than you. I'm just kidding. I'm totally
Well, you're just more committed to this podcast, I think.
That might be true. That might be
Yeah.
true.
Did the way the
Um,
vest help you think?
it made me think like, is this what walking was like when I was 12 pounds heavier? Because this sucks.
Mhm.
I don't know. I
You
don't know.
don't notice those things.
No, because it's just the way you are until you're not,
Hmm.
for sure. Um,
Right.
so,
So we're gonna be talking about prior learning,
oh my God.
things that we do like along the lines of strength-based pedagogy, kind of like what we use or how you can use things that students already know, even if like it might not be related to class. You might be surprised.
Totally. So I actually was thinking on my weighted vest walk this morning that I think that all of this ties back to constructivist learning theory. Do you agree?
Yeah. What? What? Is
The
this the chai? What's
the
happening?
caffeine is hitting me hard.
Do you agree? What do you think about that?
If you want, I could be like the Google LM podcast people and be like, when you say something.
No, no,
No,
it's good.
okay,
It's good.
deal.
Yes, constructivist learning.
Yeah. So right, because
Remind me what that is.
so constructivist learning theory, Ben, is the idea that knowledge is constructed often by connecting to things we already know and then building knowledge through experiences. But you can't ever just like build an experience. It has to be tethered to something that a person
Yeah.
has experienced at some point in their life and then build
This is like
upon that.
this is like Vygotsky, right? Like
It
isn't that the person
is.
who started with that? Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
It's kind of
man.
this idea of pushing out into a proximal development zone.
Yeah. Ooh.
See, yep, I just pulled all of that out of nowhere. I have nothing up right now. Like those are the things that I remember. And I think that like theory was kind of tied mostly to social like learning and social development.
Yes,
But when you're looking at the things that we're doing in the classroom, right, there's a lot of social aspects to that too.
for sure. For sure. And typically it should spawn from like something not only students know but that students are curious about, which you want to go back far too. We can go back to Dewey and his idea that like education is democracy at work because you can learn all the things. My chapter 1 is so tight right now for my dissertation. I just want you to know.
That's
Anyway.
right. That makes so much more sense. I was like, this feels like the most professional that we've ever been. We just start including citations.
See our reference list for questions. Anyway, yes. So this is way too heavy. Tell me something fun that you do that builds on prior knowledge.
I I do a lot of hands-on stuff, I think, but um I can give a good example. I was because that's not quantum mechanics. We'll come back to that, I think.
Oh my.
I know. Well, I was looking at our presentation because that's the place that I was kind of thinking
Yeah.
of
Drawing
focusing.
from.
But because I teach physics, right? And so we've talked about how would start classes with like a video and then we would unpack it. Because if we want to talk about motion in a circle, like students have experienced in their life, right? Like what that feels like. And then we're kind of building on we're adding a mathematical layer to
Yes.
that physical experience that students have.
Do you ever have students spin in a circle?
Uh, yes, I do. Wait, did
Yay!
you know that or
No!
like,
I was
okay.
hoping you did.
Yeah. We have so this is it. I adapted like a tutorial that the University of Washington that I've seen through the University of Washington. This is something I used to do with students when I was a TA in grad school. It was one of our tutorial activities where we would have this spinning platform and a stool that like sits onto it in notches, so that way it's not going to fall off or tip over. And then you like have a really big bicycle wheel with two handles, and you like spin it
Mm-mm.
and then you hand it to the students, and then as they like turn the wheel, like they will start spinning because the angular momentum is being conserved.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. I'm glad that you do that. I like that level of disorder in a class.
Yeah, I don't know if that's building on prior knowledge because most of them are like, why is this happening? But they think it's pretty cool.
Fair enough.
What did you think I was doing spinning students in a circle about?
I don't know. I was hoping that you were
Oh,
spinning students. So you, even though your class like looks messy from the casual observer, because there's a lot of like, it's not entirely linear in
yeah.
what's happening in your class, which I think is really cool. Um, I don't think of you as the most frivolous person. I don't know if frivolous is the right, whimsical.
Whimsy.
Whimsical.
Oh, I have my moments.
You have your moments of whimsy. Good.
I plan for whimsy.
Good.
But we like there's this funny meme I think that's out there that it's just like, oh, we're gonna talk about torque, and it's then there's a picture of a door and it's like my time to shine. Because like whenever you want to talk about like force causing rotation, like the door is a perfect example because you have the axis through which the hinges act. And I'm like, if you push on the hinges, are you going to open the door? No, right? Like, so they understand that. And it's just like the further away they push, the less force they have to act. Because again, connecting to prior like experience and just again being a human being, they understand balance. They understand the concept of balance. And so connecting that to the door and then again adding that mathematical layer to our zone of proximal development
Ah,
is pretty fun. What
I'm teasing you. Um, so you know one of the things that I do when I'm trying to so actually I want to go somewhere else. So
okay.
I a couple years ago started teaching a geology of the national parks class. And I started teaching it after first of all, there was no existing model at our college. So it
Mhm.
was the first time I had inherited a class that had nothing to, like, no materials to inherit. So I did like a deep dive into what other folks did at other colleges, and there really was no like one model, which is interesting. Like a lot of our intro level classes, like every physical geology textbook does the same chapters in the same order, right? It doesn't matter. Like seriously, 95% of them are the same.
Physics, yeah, physics is not that much different, I would
Okay.
say.
But geology of the national parks is totally different.
Hmm.
There's more of like a natural history type. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I had to like build the framework. I've always had a framework, and this was like building the framework. So my first unit we're actually testing on tomorrow, and my first unit is about rift parks that form along rift zones. I ultimately decided to design the entire course, but the framework I was using was plate tectonics. I would divide all of the parks by the tectonic forces that shaped them. And so I did that in part because the class follows the 101 where they learn about plate tectonics. So they have
Hmm.
that prior knowledge. And so this isn't like I know what it feels like to spin in a circle. This is like I know what the framework of plate tectonics is. So I was thinking back over the first unit and how I'm actually in every chapter building on prior knowledge. So we start by a broad overview about what happens. Oh, I might be you today and get in the weeds, where like a piece of continental crust slowly over geologic time gets pulled into two separate chunks of crust. And it's a process that takes, well over, I mean, if you want to go really
Like, oh, definitely at least over a couple years.
oh my God. So like
Yes.
100 million years, right? Like it's a
Yeah.
really long process. So
It's funny because it's like, it's technically true, but not useful scale of time. Just
mhm,
saying, like, Julius Caesar died like well over 70 years ago. Like, it's
yes.
not, it's not a helpful scale, but it's true.
It's yes, correct. So we start the whole class off reviewing plate tectonics. So we build on prior knowledge. So they remember we do a retrieval activity, right? So retrieval
Hmm.
means they reach back into their brains and they find the knowledge. And I make the retrieval activity. I'm like, it's kind of like when it snows in Rochester, and the roads are still there under the snow, but we got to plow the snow out of the way so we can find the roads to get to work, right? And so that's the retrieval for me. So we do that, and then we spend a day just talking about the entire long geologic process of rifting. And then from there, we do a unit on early rifting, where we talk about the Grand Teton National Park. And then
Hmm.
we have an early on, like mid to late stage rifting, where we talk about like Death Valley National Park. And then we have extreme late stage rifting, which is like we had this hysterical lecture on like some of the national seashores on the East Coast. We compared Cape Hatteras National Seashore in North Carolina to Cumberland Island National Seashore in Georgia. And the reason it's funny, and I'm sorry, I'll get out of the weeds in just a second, but this is
No,
accessible, I
this is fun.
promise.
This is groundwater and pig poop.
No,
So
we did talk about pig poop, by the way. They were fascinated to learn that I modeled pig poop. So there are different coastal processes make different shaped barrier islands. So Cape Hatteras is on what coastal geologists refer to as a hot dog shaped island. And that's a true story. That's like in literature. It's a hot dog shaped island. And so then I showed them a picture of Cumberland Island National Seashore, and I was like, what shape island do you think this one looks like? And my student Tim, who I adore but is a meathead, is like, it looks like a chicken wing drumstick, miss. And I was like, they're called drumstick shaped islands. And they're like, no. And I was like, yes. So that's extreme late stage. But the whole, anyway, it's funny. But the whole unit is like, you start where we were last semester. We look at one
mhm.
process, and then we look at examples of this process, and we build, but we always go back to the process. So it feels intentional, even though we had a whole
Yeah.
conversation once about what to do on wild horses on islands. But
So you're talking about building on prior knowledge that like you yourself had given them in the classroom.
from the semester before, yes. And
Got it. Got it.
what I did from the day before too. Yes. I always do that, like where we anyway. Like you come into class on a Tuesday, for example. You haven't seen these
Yeah.
students for a third since last Thursday, and you're like, okay, let's reconnect because 400 things have happened to you since you left my classroom.
Oh yeah, yeah. I use a lot of formative assessment stuff for that
Yeah.
specifically. Like I will review because when you're physics and engineering are classes that are very much going to build.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, so other fun stuff you do to connect to prior knowledge. Oh, do you want to talk about your quantum physics now?
We can. I mean, if that's yeah, we'll do that because I don't know what else to do at the moment. That's
It'll
what I was
come.
like a little bit prepared for, but
Okay. Yeah.
like so this kind of comes from, and I actually in this presentation because I think our theme for the TCC this year was about strength-based pedagogy. And you and I were kind of talking about classroom research and how you can use classroom research to kind of build on students' knowledge. Just kind of thinking about like, what are you walking into the classroom with? And
Yeah.
then like, what can I do with that? Right. Because
Yes.
things do build and there are connections that you can make that are beneficial to students. And I developed a whole like tutorial in quantum mechanics that like built on something that was familiar to them, which is just like coordinate system, like X and Y axes, like a
Okay.
vertical and horizontal set of axes. So in quantum mechanics, right, like everybody knows about Schrodinger's cat. Like that's kind of just like cultural knowledge that just exists in the world, right? And what's
Yes.
special about Schrodinger's cat? The Schrodinger's cat is the one where it's like you put the cat in the box. It's way more complicated than like what society makes it out to be because the whole theory was actually there's a radioactive isotope that's in there, and if the radioactive isotope decays, it will like release a poison that then will kill the cat. But you
Oh
don't
my God,
know.
is that true?
Yes. This didn't actually happen. There was no actual cat. This is a thought experiment.
I'm reporting you to someone.
Good luck.
Okay, go ahead.
This was not an actual.
No
There was no
cats
actual
were
cat.
harmed.
No cats were harmed. There's a thought experiment because you don't know whether or not the like particle atom went through its radioactive decay. You don't know whether or not the cat is alive or dead unless you open up the box, right?
Yes.
And so that's the uncertainty associated with this idea of measurement is what we kind of look at in quantum mechanics. And there's this really interesting thing that involves magnets, and we if you orient magnets one way, that's one basis. If you orient the magnets like another way, that's a second basis. And like we want probabilities depend on how the magnets are oriented and they change. And it's very interesting, right? It's kind of this idea, what?
Is it? I'm sorry. Go ahead. No.
It's interesting to some people, very specific people.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay.
But we can create situations and we can kind of get things set up so there's certain probabilities of whether or not you would say measure heads or tails on flipping a coin, right? Like we can kind of look at electrons rather than being oriented in a whole bunch of different kinds of spins, like they're either going to be spin up or spin down. There's no in between, like they're going to be spin up or spin down.
Okay.
And you can orient magnets that will like kind of deflect the beams. And the fact that the beams became two particular beams instead of just this array of possible representations of spins is like big deal alert, right? The fact that there's two specific spins means that that measurement is discrete. Like there's only two possible measurements. It's either going to be spin up or spin down, but the orientation creates a different basis.
I'd like to take this time to apologize to our audience for Ben and I being so far in the weeds tonight that you are like, what are they even talking about? It's cool. Oh, it's cool.
But my point is that all of that complicated mathematics and linear algebra that we use in that class, we can kind of make it analogous to an X and Y coordinate system. So, or like north and east, like compass directions, right? To build
Yes.
on people's prior understanding of compasses.
Yes.
So we can kind of think about if we are taking the probability like of whether or not this coin is going to be heads, we can map that onto like the horizontal axis. If we take the probability related to the y, we can or related to spin down, we can map that onto the y-axis. And it's definitely more complicated than that. But I know that people are not coming to this for quantum mechanics. But we can kind of represent like a point on a graph, like as a vector of like what that would be. And in order to then look at a different orientation of magnets, we can just think about we're looking at a different set of axes. So instead of using north and east as our standard y and x axes, we can think about what if it's northeast and northwest are a set of axes. And now we're looking at that same point on a grid, but now in reference to northwest and northeast instead of north and east.
Okay.
The point is, if you're a third year physics student, thinking about it in terms of Cartesian coordinates is a lot easier. It's something that you've been working with for 2 years. And now we've taken something that is fairly complicated in terms of like this math system that you're not even learning yet because your math sequence is not lined up with your physics sequence. And we're putting it in the context of something that you already understand. And like I was doing research in this area when I was a postdoc and just found that like the activity that is building on students' knowledge and showing them this idea of changing basis and finding the probabilities in a different like orientation, mapping onto this Cartesian coordinate system, like they were completely outperforming the way that we were doing things beforehand. And they were actually going through that process of changing the basis the way that we wanted to, the easy way, the quick way, because they were able to visualize it by connecting to that prior understanding. I'm never talking about quantum again.
So you actually touched on one of the notes that I wrote down, that one of the things that you have to consider when you are building on prior knowledge is absolutely your setting, right? The level of your students, so third year engineering students.
Yeah.
One of the things that we talked about today in our faculty caucus was reading levels. And so depending on like, there was a big study that came out recently about 12th grade reading levels that like a third of US students are currently reading at an appropriate reading level. So when you give a student something to react to, whether it like that's part of it, and the skills that they bring to it is different. Whether what their math skills are, what sort of comprehension skills you're getting, you're preparing for them to to activate in their brain. Um,
I
yeah.
have a fun one too.
Yes, please.
We
No,
can come
go
back to.
on.
Oh no, I was gonna say I have a fun thing that I do about building on prior knowledge. So I teach the Excel and programming course, and we were talking about algorithms, which is essentially like the planning process for writing code. Because like when people write code or they program, you don't go straight to the computer and start typing away. Like that's not what that looks like when you're trying to make a robot work. You are going to go through and say, what's the problem that I'm trying to solve? How can I solve it? And then you write code,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you implement it and it doesn't work. And then you go back to the beginning, right? Because that's how nothing works the first time. But we were specifically focusing on the algorithm part of things. And I gave them a task. I was like, you have a little avatar that's going to move from A to B. I want you to give it very clear instructions. But we want to talk about what makes a good algorithm. I bring up something that like is just a core memory for me, which is in like because I went to a New York State public school, somewhere in fourth grade, we had a activity where we had to write instructions for making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
You did? Why?
And somebody else had to then follow those instructions like to the
Oh,
letter.
okay.
And so it's about being able to give clear direction
Yep.
about what you want to accomplish. And the thing is most of these students have also been through the New York State public system. So I have so many of them that like you just watch their eyes like it's just like that memory just like was hidden and it comes back.
That's
But it's
I
the idea that
also went to New York. I mean, you obviously
I
went.
know not everybody, but not
Wow.
everybody does this, but like not all of my students who have also been through New
Okay.
York State public school have
Okay.
done this. But it's a common thing I think that's happened in a lot of curriculums because it's the equivalent of if taking the what would you tell me to do if I had a loaf of bread that was still in the bag with a twist tie on it and peanut butter and jelly? And what's the first thing that you would say if you were telling someone how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
I tell you to untie the bag and
Right.
take out two pieces of bread.
Great.
That's where I would start.
That's where you would start. Then what?
Pick up the knife, open the peanut butter, open the
Yeah, so
jelly.
you're doing great, right? But like in fourth
Crushing.
grade, it's a completely different. You're crushing it. You're crushing it.
I've had little children. You have to be, and I've had decades of students. So
Yeah, that's fair. You know. But it's that equivalent of like, well, you take the peanut butter and you put it on the bread. And if that's all that you say, then like what the computer does is just take the jar of peanut butter and just set it on top of the loaf, which is still in the bag, right? So
right.
it's a matter like they can see that, they can connect that. So it's an idea of like they already kind of understand what clear directions look like.
Yep.
And I am make it clear to them that the computer you're working with is basically a 5-year-old that read like some malicious compliance subreddit. Like they're gonna do
Wildly
exactly what you
specific.
say. Yeah, it's wildly specific, but it's like it's gonna do exactly what you tell it to do. And so you need to be very clear about what your instructions are.
So when we teach about the earth, um, it turns out that students have wildly different lived experiences when they come into my class in terms of like what their experiences have been like going to the beach, right? Going to the beach
Hmm.
at Lake Ontario is very different than going to the Atlantic Ocean, which is different than the Pacific, So, one thing that I have routinely come back to over the years, and I blame my Italian heritage, is like food metaphors. Like, I have found so much wealth connecting students to food because I think it cuts across experience levels. Everyone's had a chocolate chip cookie. So, for example, I learned this actually at a nursing PD thing because nurses deal with really a tremendous amount of terminology, right? And
Hmm.
it's not like most of that is normal vernacular for most people. But if you connect a term with a picture that a student knows, they have an easier time. So I came out of that workshop and I made a whole worksheet, which we still use today, that compares different cookies to different igneous textural terms. So, for example, if an igneous rock has two different crystal sizes in it, we say it's called a porphyritic rock. But the picture next to porphyritic is a chocolate chip cookie because there's two different sizes there. There's right there.
Hmm.
But if a rock has all big crystals, I have that next to a picture of like a Rice Krispie treat because those are all big
Hmm.
visible crystals. So anyway, so I've done that, and another thing we talk about is how when crust cools, it shrinks in size over time. It like cools and it becomes denser. And the explanation I always use for that is like when you first take a cake out of the oven, right? And you put it on the stovetop to cool, the
I
cake
am
is,
so hungry
I'm
now.
sorry.
It's okay.
Like the cake is really poofy, right? You can't frost it right away. It's too hot. It's all poofy. And then you have to go away and come back. And the cake has actually shrunk when it's cool enough to frost. And it's still even a little warm. But regardless, students have that. Almost all students have the visual of like taking a cake out of the oven,
Hmm.
or like rocks cool faster on the surface of the earth than they do in the earth. And so I give them the example of you're cooking your Thanksgiving Day turkey, you turn off the oven, does the turkey cool faster in the oven if you leave it in the oven or if you take it out and put it on the stovetop? So yeah.
Do you teach this class before lunch?
I teach this class, yes, sometimes. I also sometimes like I use these analogies at in our night class sometimes too. So
Yeah,
that's a different thing. But
I'm just being funny.
oh my god, like there's these cute little volcanoes that are called spatter cone volcanoes, and they literally form when just like little plops of lava come up to the surface. And I tell them that it's like when you have an Italian sauce on simmer and you can hear it, right? It's like that plop 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 sound,
Yeah.
and like they get it. They get it and they see a spatter cone volcano and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's what it looks like." And so, anyway, food is a
No,
it
it's
brings
good.
us together.
The universal connector.
It is, especially
Yeah,
for Italians, but yeah.
that's so true. No, I've been to the Italian family Sunday night dinner, so like I know what you're talking about.
You know what a spatter cone volcano looks like then.
Yes.
I do have a
Well, as
question for
soon
you.
as
Go ahead.
you,
No,
oh
finish.
no, I was thinking it. No, 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 because as soon as you were talking about the splattering, I was thinking about the way that like if you cook it with the pot off, then there's gonna be like bits of
Yes,
like all over the place. You know,
it's true. It's true. So it wasn't until recently. So I teach like the 100 and the 200 level course. So I know what they do in the 100. So I know what like the
right.
course learning outcomes or standards are for the prior
Hmm.
course. But it wasn't until recently that I started looking back at the high school standards. Is that something that you've done before?
No. I mean, when I was in grad school, like I was taking a course on like approaches to physics education research that was a mixture of grad students. Well, it was all grad students, but it was a mixture of like PhD, like physics people that
Mm-hmm.
were doing education research, but then also like masters of science and teaching
Mm-hmm.
people. And we had to look at like NGSS standards, which was the thing back then, and it
Yeah.
maybe still is.
Yeah.
I don't
No, it
know. I
is.
don't follow that.
It
Okay.
is.
Um, so I looked at stuff then, but part of the issue is that because there's like not a lot of good physics classes in high schools because we're not putting out physics teachers like the way that we need to. Like we don't, so a lot of our students don't take physics in high school. So
That's very true. That's very
yeah,
true. I guess that doesn't, yeah, that's true. So I guess they've never taken physics. I guess in eighth grade, they take
sometimes. Yeah.
physical science, which is a mixture
Yes.
of like physics and other stuff.
Kind of.
Yeah, that's
I know
interesting.
there was like when I was working with my physics teacher when I was like a senior and I was doing stuff, there was like a sixth grade classroom where we did some like physics stuff, but it was a
Yeah,
lot of just hands-on.
yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Interesting.
When I used to teach like the second section of physics and we talk about current like moving in wires and what happens when you like close a circuit,
Mm-hmm.
I will kind of connect a lot of that stuff to the way that traffic moves and I'm like, it's not like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like it happens all at once. Like imagine if when the traffic like turned green, all of the cars started moving at once.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what current does in a circuit. So like kind of connecting that back to that experience. Everyone's been in traffic.
Yes, that's right. Because otherwise, it's hard to like know what your students know unless you specifically ask them, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's true. And I think that's the whole point of kind of trying to do a little bit of that like research in your classroom, even informally.
yes.
Taking a look at your assessments, right? And thinking about, hey, what's going on here is a form of research, I would argue.
Yeah.
Because like it's data, you're analyzing data. You just it's when it's more than okay, here's the grades, I'm putting them in the grade book. Like that's when it becomes like informal research because you're saying like how well did they do with this?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? What are things that I might need to do differently?
Right. It's
Those are
action
important things.
research. It's action
Hmm.
research. Exactly. Exactly. I think most teachers do this and either don't necessarily have time and space to like get deep into the weeds to but like I think all teachers who are aware of what's going on in their classrooms, like to your point when you're entering in grades and you're like, wow, there's a big segment of the population in my class that really struggled with this concept,
Hmm.
then you can dig a little deeper there. But there's not always time for that, which is unfortunate. But
Right.
life, really, I guess.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always input when I'm inputting grades for my test in my Excel file, I always do it by question. So I can look at the average on each question and
Mm-hmm.
kind of analyze stuff if I need to.
Is that what resonates with you about Excel? I'm sorry, I was re-listening to the podcast. I just finished editing the podcast where we talked to Malis, and you talked about what about Excel resonated with you, and it like cracked me up again. Like again, I was like, what resonates with you? Anyway,
It's a good time. No, I got it.
yeah,
It's good.
no, it's good. Um, so a lot of times, like, so you've seen my activity where there's three general types of volcanoes, right? And so I have students look at pictures of like archetypes of those three types of volcanoes because they all have seen stuff, right? And they're actually looking at stuff, right? Like with those three pictures. And so we're building on their observations. And
Yep.
there's really cool research that actually came out of the University of Rochester about like what a geologist sees. It's very interesting. So like
That is
it's
interesting.
using eye tracking technology, and when
Hmm.
you're looking at a landscape, a geologist sees things fundamentally differently than the untrained person, which is super
That
interesting.
doesn't surprise me.
No.
I remember when we went on that excursion, that like that fun
Mm-hmm.
team building field trip or whatever
Yeah,
that we did with faculty and staff. Who knows if that'll ever happen again.
I know.
But you were just like, you see how this stream is at like a 95-degree angle? That's because just like I did not see that. I was not paying attention to the fact that the stream came in and then turned at 90 degrees.
Yes, because there's fractures in the subsurface. It's wild. It's very cool.
Yeah,
So,
it was very cool.
but like we're trained to notice patterns and stuff like that. Whether it's the way the rock weathers, whether it's where vegetation grows or where it doesn't grow. But like you can actually track the progression of a geology student by looking at their eye tracking data over time. Because at the begin, right? It's
That's
cool.
wild.
It's
Yeah, that's
wild.
very cool.
And so because there's a shortage of geologists, a lot of the research was focused on like how do we get students to like that more end point, or like how do we quicken that progression for students.
What you just need to do is give everybody the eye tracking test, and if they're paying attention to the right things, you're gonna be a geologist.
That's
Come with
right.
me.
The rest
Get
of
in the
you
van.
just wander around the park. I'll pick you up
Get
later. Get
get in the van.
just roll around in the back. It's fine.
There's another thing that I do that you made me think of. So again, I teach the Excel class, and we do some stuff in that because it resonates with me. Uh, and I actually teach them a little bit of linear algebra because like there
Ooh.
are stuff you can work with tables of data in Excel very easily.
Mm.
Whereas like something that if you're in an actual upper division math class doing like linear algebra stuff, it is like a more arduous like process where in Excel it's just a function. You can just multiply
Really?
stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a function in Excel that just multiplies matrices, which
That's
like
cool.
I spent a week learning how to do by hand.
Right.
Right. And so I want to show students how to use this because Excel can solve systems of equations. If you have six equations with six unknowns or three equations with three unknowns, if you have a set of things that you don't know
Yep.
and you have enough equations for the number of things that you don't know, you can solve that in Excel in like 3 steps.
That's wild.
It is wild, but you
Yes.
you have to know how to make the table
Mm-hmm.
of like the data for the coefficients of those variables, blah 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 math. And I want to get them to the ability of like understanding how that multiplication works, even if I'm not asking them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Excel is doing that work for them, but they need to kind of be able to see how it's like row times column and how that turns into what the answer is.
Okay.
So what I do to teach my students who are at least at a math level of like pre-calc to get them some linear algebra knowledge, like it's fairly intuitive. If I gave you a row of costs for food and I gave you a column for the amount of food that you were buying, and I asked you like what's the total amount of money you're going to spend
Gotcha.
if you buy like these amounts of foods
Yep.
at these prices,
Sure.
like what would you do? Right? You would
Yes.
multiply. I know you didn't answer, so I'm
Oh,
going to do it.
please do.
I can read your social cues now that you tell me what they are. You take the cost and multiply by the amount of food, and you do that for each pair.
Okay.
So like the first element here in this row, the first element in this column, those get multiplied. That gets added to the second element in this row times the second element in this column. Those get multiplied. All of those get multiplied and then added together. That's matrix multiplication. That's all it is. Right. So then I've like primed them for that because they can all, well, you just multiply the amount by the food and add it up. And I'm like, Excel can do that for you in one function. Like you don't have to type out this long equation. There's just a function called MMULT, which is short for matrix multiplication, and Excel does it. You just need to do row by column. And so we get that kind of motivated and then we work it out a little bit. And then they're asking questions. They're like, oh, well, what happens if you have an extra row? Like, and so we go through that kind of process. But I give them a little bit of linear algebra based solely on the fact that they know how to figure out how much they need to spend on food.
Um, I'm going to give you an example of how I built on prior knowledge today, and then I'm going to like ask you a different question. So,
Okay.
so today we did our lab on the Cascade volcanoes of Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. And one of the things that they had was they had like they had to figure out how far different spots in Washington state traveled in over a period of 7 years so that they could figure out the rate of plate motion. But first, they needed to know how far it had traveled. But in order to find it, it was on like a XY graph where they needed to figure out what the length of the
Oh,
what the length of
no, I
the
was gonna
way
say
was.
it's helpful that you have like the pictures because I was like, man, you gotta track it over 7 years. It's gonna take you a while to get your geology degree.
No, so there was that. There were like places that were, nailed into the earth and carefully measured every year for 7 years. So they knew how far north and how far west they had traveled, but they didn't know how far northwest they had traveled, like the resultant vector, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, guys, we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem. And they're like, what do you mean? And I was like, I know, this is what we've been training for. Like, this is what it's used for because we'll figure out, see, that's the resultant. That's how far it's moved northwest.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like,
Mm-hmm.
I did geology because I don't like math. And I was like, I have bad news for you. And that is that there is math in all parts of science once you get above like the general observation level. And they're like,
Yeah,
damn it.
that's so true.
So my question is, how would you, as a non, so we've been doing very STEMmy things in this
Sure.
conversation, but what about if we were non-STEM teachers? Like, what might you do to connect students to prior knowledge?
I mean, I guess it depends on what the class
Totally.
is, right?
Yes.
I think a lot of that comes from personal narrative, though. I mean, I immediately am going to English because that's like the next
Yeah.
like thing over that I have when we move out of STEM.
Yeah.
I and I think just to kind of get students in that process of writing, like writing about themselves, because you have the skills to do that already if you're here feasibly. So like get in that mode. I guess it would depend on the class though, because I'm thinking like, what would you do if it was like a U.S. history class from like
So
for this over the 1600s to the 1800s?
so I actually think you do it the exact same way. I had this moment when we were talking. I think that you always connect it back to their
Hmm.
stories, like that they have lived. And so it's the same sort of thing, regardless, like if you're teaching about something that happened in the 1700s, right? You find an analog, a modern analog for what a student, right? And the same,
Yep.
right? And the same thing with like English. You just mentioned it. You connect it. You're always starting by connecting it back to the student's story, regardless of the discipline, I think.
Or you just humanize it. Like the thing I was thinking about in is just kind of grabbing first person, like what's the word that I want? I'm not primary sources.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You got primary sources, which
Right.
inherently is problematic considering who had access and like
Sure.
knowledge to write, like depending on the time period that you're looking at.
Yes.
But like just kind of connecting it to what that experience was like for people, like that lived experience.
One of the things that I had my kids read over the pandemic was because they, oh my gosh, when it first hit, I think they were doing US history, and it was right around they were getting to like the Civil War, and it was 2 weeks of chaos, but they really were craving structure. I had them read parts of like the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, because I think in the very first chapter he talks about how he didn't know what his birthday was. Like it was recorded nowhere. And that is like something that gets to every student, right? Every kid, because everyone knows what their birthday is. Like, how do you not know
Yeah,
something fundamental about
right.
yourself? Like you, and that I think you're talking about humanizing it. That
Hmm.
humanizes what it was like growing up, or at least like what it was part of what it was like to be like a slave in the United
Yeah.
States. But
We
anyway,
can't end our
it's
podcast like
wild to
that
not
either.
know when your birthday is. That's all.
It is. Yeah, yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
And I mean, I think there's stuff you can do in like a sociology class that does lend itself more to like the human demographic and social sciences, like that's there. Anthropology is like a cultural study, like there's stuff that you can do. Again, it's kind of connecting things back to personal experience, which I mean, we try and do in STEM also. Like that was what a lot of our examples were.
Yeah.
Like students in a physics class being able to think about what balance means. They understand what speed means because they like move around in their space,
Yes.
right? So they get a sense of like position and velocity and what changing velocity looks like. You give them cookies. So like it's just about connecting it to them as human beings. That's kind of what it always comes back to.
It does. It does. That
Even
Vikings
if it's quantum mechanics and Schrodinger's cat.
just always goes back to being human. Honestly, I feel like education is a human endeavor. Learning is a human endeavor. We just have robots for it now. This is a heartwarming episode.
Was it?
I don't know.
But even when I was explaining quantum mechanics, I connected to Schrodinger's cat and I talked about flipping a coin heads and tails because there's probability associated with those things. So
Absolutely. And I talked
yeah,
about baking a cake.
there's there's things that you have that you can connect students to when you are putting your classes together. And again, I think again, it's humanizing, connecting to their prior experience, whether or not it's in the class or whether or not it's outside of class. There are things you can do.
Build connections, man.
Hmm.
Cool. That feels like the right place to stop.
Yeah,
All right. Thanks,
not on.
everyone. Not,
Oh
no.
yeah,
Yeah,
goodbye.
no.
I thought
Do you ever have students spin in a circle?